Hearing to order at 5:31 p.m. And I'll lead you in the Pledge of Allegiance. So if all rise, place your right hand over your heart. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Adriana, can you lead us on a roll call, please? Here. 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 That's it.
Here.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to approve agenda submitted?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. This time we'll move on to public comments. This time is any request from the public to address the governing board. Please fill out a request to address the board form. 3 minutes per person, 20 minutes per subject matter. The board is not always at liberty of taking action or discussing any items not on the adopted agenda. Do we have any public comment?
No, we don't.
No public comment. Moving to study session 3.1, improving CVUSD climate and culture presentation and discussion. Dr. Valentino.
Thank you. Good evening, President Galarza, board members, team. This evening, the time spent is designed to provide the space for board members to have conversations around the safety measures that we have put in place, not only more recently due to the issues that arose at CV High School and a couple of other campuses, but to look at previous decisions made to see if they still align with the vision and goals of the board when it comes to creating safe spaces for students and staff. And so facilitating the conversation will be Reina Sohagen, who has incredible experience, and I'll let her introduce herself so that the team can focus on the conversation and on the facilitation of it. And we're here to answer questions that you may have, and also the directors are here to answer questions that you may have or information that you may need.
Great, thank you. Hello, thank you so much for having me. First of all, I appreciate all of you being here and what you are doing. It's important work and I'm happy to be here. Thank you. I appreciate all of you for being here. I'm a facilitator, as was said, and I have over 20 years of experience facilitating group discussions, both in English and Spanish, both in the public and private sector. I have conducted many discussions over the years with parents, students about a variety of education-related topics. And again, I'm happy to facilitate and happy to be here to facilitate this conversation, which I find very relevant and important. Thank you. And with that, we shall start. So the way that I want to conduct this is I want to go through every one of the points that were written out here in the agenda. So all of the safety components with the most consensus, which are already in place, and sort of move quickly through them. And I'm going to go to the board. And I think. Yes. Okay. Fantastic. So I'm just going to go through each one of those points. And as you know, as you can see there are many points. We have about 15 to go through. So we can move quickly first through the ones where we have the most consensus and that are already in place and just kind of give it a quick evaluation. And when I say quick, I don't take that lightly. I know each one of these are important to you, but since you already know them and there's consensus around them, let's kind of move through them so we can all go home to our families in a timely manner. Okay. You like that? Okay, great. So let's start with campus security assistance.
Jocelyn,
Let's
she gonna be
do
able to hear?
strengths,
Is Jocelyn gonna be able to hear?
weaknesses. Is everybody okay with this way of proceeding? Great. And then we're gonna do improvements and next steps. Fantastic. So campus security assistance, would anybody like to give me a strength of this, what you feel is a strength of this component of this that you have? So sorry, I will hold this if you prefer. Okay. So campus security assistance. I'm so used to screaming. I'm gonna need to speak. Used to this microphone situation. Okay. Campus security assistance. Please volunteer a strength that you see with campus security assistance. And if nobody volunteers, I'll call on you. Yes, please.
Is the longevity of the school. We have a school that's over 100 years old. And I think CV High School has a sense of family, right? I think that's a big strength, is that for the most part, right? We have a very old campus with a lot of story. And I think if we have one thing to be proud of is that I think we have a real feeling of family, school spirit at CV High School.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that with me. And how does that relate to the campus security assistance then, in terms of what they bring to the table?
But if I could add on to what you were saying, I
Please.
think, given that it's a family, there's a community, a lot of our securities are homegrown. They went to our schools, they relate to our students. So I find that to be a strength that,
We look after each other.
Okay, so great. So campus security assistance, the strength, I love that. Community, family spirit. They can relate to the students because of that. Other strengths any other strengths that I missed?
And they have been there for quite a while, like.
Got it.
they've been there.
Right.
Relationship.
Old relationships, right. So they've been here for a while. A long time, and relationships.
I think our security officers also know what they're doing, given the recent events and the way the security team has handled those events. They've taken care of any threat that may arise.
Got it. So they've handled events already. They've been proven to handle these events well.
Correct.
Great. Fantastic. Okay. Anything else to add to the strengths? Any weaknesses that we see at this point? And again, it wouldn't personally be anything personal, but any weaknesses or anything that you can see that's a concern?
Well,
Sorry, let me. Go ahead, Mr. Acuna, and then we'll go back to.
the only
Mr.
weakness
Gonzalez.
I see on this thing, I agree with my colleagues on the issues of that. The only weakness I see right now is that we need to know what a plan would look like, how many would be at each site, based on enrollment, based on need, not necessarily like everybody gets one. So the only weakness I see from implementing more of this is big. And I know they're working on a plan. I know they're doing that, but
Yes.
I'm assuming that's what this is for.
This is for that.
That is the weakness of being able to implement this right now.
Mhm.
To have an actual plan, because I think, I'm not going to speak for everybody, but I think in general, most of us were supportive of adding them appropriately, but not just adding them to add them, just to make a show, to pretend like we're doing something, but to actually put them in place where they would work, and the justification based on the needs of the schools and the enrollment of the schools.
Right, so the appropriate implementation, or addition of and use of these campus security assistants relating to each school, and kind of on a need basis, like who needs them, how many, and that sort of thing, right? Okay, very good. And so in order to be able to have that, which is kind of what you said can be of concern, what would you need and how can that be improved then? What kinds of things would you need? And anybody else can jump in.
Let's maybe before before we go forward, right?
Yes.
Let's talk about why we're here. We're, what's the weakness that we have isn't a weakness. I think the reason we're here is not a weakness at CV High School. It's a weakness across the country, right? We've had 378 mass shootings since the beginning of the year. We're on pace to have 700. We've had attacks on people for gender, religion, culture, and we're living a time of an unprecedented time across the country, right? Something that's unique to this country alone. As this happens, and as media and news happens quickly, and information is moving, we're forced to react. There's uncertainties. We all worry, right? My child goes to CV High School, and when I hear an ambulance, I worry about that ambulance and where it's going and why it's going there. I hear a police car. I live by the school. It creates that uncertainty, and I think the children, the teachers, the community, right, at large is reacting to circumstances that are prevalent across the country, right? That's why we're here. Should that not be the case, we wouldn't be having this discussion today.
Thank you for bringing that up. It's the larger conversation within which we're having this conversation. Thank you. That being said, when I talk about weaknesses, obviously I'm talking about some of the things that could be improved and tweaked with this component, with each component. I don't mean to imply that there are weaknesses in the entire system here, but every system has components, and each component maybe could be improved. And in order to evaluate it, we have to see the reality of what's working great, but maybe could be improved. So,
Let me
yes.
react sarcastically, right? So if we, to half the community, real strength would be to create a prison, right? To put up walls around the school and to metal detect everybody that walks in and everybody that walks out, and to have 24-hour security, and to treat every child that comes to school as if they were in a prison, right? That would be an exaggeration of what some people would believe is a strength, right? A strength of security.
Well,
On the other hand, right? And
yes.
I'm exaggerating.
Yeah.
On the other hand, we have people that completely don't want that, right? That want our children to go to school in free spirit and free form, right? And to have an experience like the one I had when I went to school there, right? And not under the circumstance that we're going to school. So
Right.
coming out of
You yourself brought up this bigger, like you said, the bigger context of what we're dealing with and the reality.
Sure.
Of today.
So when
So-
we talk about weaknesses and strength, it's important to understand context, right?
Got it. Thank you very much.
Anyway,
Yes.
We can go.
Yes. No, thank you for bringing it up. It's important. You're right. Yes.
Jocelyn?
Yes, Jocelyn, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for being flexible, and I appreciate you all speaking in the mic. I think a strength, and I think it could also fall as a weakness, is adaptability. So staff is able to adapt, but I think maybe a challenge or a weakness that we're maybe in, could be wrong, but what I perceive is that we're not able to adapt maybe as quick as things are changing, right? We've had COVID, we had a number of kind of things. And so I think a challenge we're encountering that could be a weakness is just the pace at which we're adapting to the changes.
Got it.
Preparing our staff to do that. Yeah.
And when you're thinking of adaptability in precisely, you're thinking of things like, for example, a crisis like COVID. Any other examples of adaptability? I didn't hear this, the second example, sorry.
Yeah, I think, even just some of the things that were mentioned earlier, like our staff are familiar with our community, like our communities are changing, like who is part of our community. And so I think that staff are able to draw from that context to make decisions when things are happening. So I feel like that adaptability is important.
It's important. It's important that they, so what you're talking about is adaptability on, for them to be able to make decisions and be able to adapt their responses. Did we lose?
Yes.
Yes, got you. Okay, interesting. Yes, and based on what we already said, that they are people that know the school, they're familiar with it. Okay, so adaptability, like allowing them sort of to.
I'm going to shut up after this, but But I think Jocelyn, if I hear Jocelyn, we're talking about adapting to reacting to the condition, right?
Mhm.
And that's how we measure, how we adapt, how we react, how big the fence is, how many security components we have is somehow going to be measured as to how we adapt to the condition across the country, right? So I believe that that's what I hear kind of Jocelyn talking about, not the other, right? But I don't know.
Mhm, mhm. In any case, yes, the adaptability, both in terms of what is happening externally around them, and then what their decision-making powers can be, maybe like, or how they, maybe it's about their voice or what they can bring to the table in terms of yeah, adapting to these crises. Does that sound about right, Ms. Vargas?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. I agree with what Trustee Gonzalez is mentioning. Like, I mean, times are changing. It's not
Got it.
what kind of, schooling what is not what I went through and what Mr. Gonzalez went through. So I think as having staff, yeah, we're able to adapt as opposed to a machine that, gets stuck in the 1980s, right?
Got it.
But I do, but there is that other layer of like being able to make decisions, with what you have at that time. But yeah. I think it's
Got it.
twofold.
Right. Use their human value versus, like you said, a machine to adapt. Very good. Any improvements, anything that we see that could be that could be a way to sort of mitigate some of the things in terms of sort of implementing or like we said, adaptability. What are some things that we can think of in terms of improvements or ways that we can mitigate that? Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to quickly mention that I think we have 5 security officers now, and it's a school of 2,600 students, and it's a large 2,700, and it's a large campus with multiple entrances. So it lends itself to sort of just a need for more personnel.
Got it. So improvements could be more personnel.
More
Oh,
per-
go ahead.
Yeah, more personnel with what Mr. Acuna was talking about earlier is I think placing them in a strategic manner.
And strategically placed.
Well, I'm gonna add something here. How do we, maybe one of the missing links is the criteria for how many personnel per, what's the ratio? And that's one component of a
Like what
criteria.
the ideal ratio.
But
yeah.
the other one is then making considerations around the type of campus and the needs of the campus. So I think that's what I would add is
Yes.
lacking in, for at least me to be able to make a decision. It's, are we only, for example, when we're talking about this, are we talking about one school and what about the others? And what's the rationale for the decision?
Got it. So the ratio student to CSA, what's the rationale? What's the rationale? Especially taking into consideration broader, not just the student to CSA ratio, but taking into consideration other things like what's been mentioned, which is like maybe entrances or the complexity of the school. Okay. Okay, great. Or sort of uniqueness of each school. Okay. So that's
So I
That's a
just
key
want to
one, I
make a
think.
comment since we're
Yes.
talking about the overall. I think one of the other weaknesses, and it's not just the weakness of this particular thing we're talking about, I think this is the weakness overall, is the way the board reacts to what's going on up there, right? See, this thing, even though we're talking about all our schools, seems to be very geared to CV High School. It's all about CV High School's problems,
Mhm.
right? Now, CV High School doesn't represent the whole district. They do have 2,700 students, but some students come, they don't represent 2,700 students. I respect their opinions and their fears and the things they say, but we talk to other students who have a totally different attitude.
Mhm.
a handful of parents come. When I go to West Shores and I go to Desert Mirage, some of the parents, they all have the same concerns, but they say, whatever the heck's going on in CV High School, don't bring it over here because I don't know what's happening over there. And the same thing, what I'm saying is that we're reacting based on who comes and shares concerns with us. That's not a way to, I don't feel, I think that's our weakness is we overreact, I believe, since in that case, to the people who come to share their concerns, not the
Okay.
thousands out there that that don't have time to come and talk to us, where we should be going out there and talking to them. And again, while there are many that support some of these ideas, I'm not gonna say they're not. In my case, there's been an awful lot more that said, why are we doing all this? We understand the concerns. Yes, certain security measures, but why are you going overboard?
So
So
would you agree?
That to me is a weakness.
Yeah.
On all our plan, all this stuff, but it always comes back to CV High School. CV High School is very unique and I know we have to do unique things for that. But it seems to be the concern of a group from there and not necessarily district-wide in some
And it's
cities.
larger, if I believe, right? It's also has.
It is a larger picture, but the solutions that certain groups are demanding, and not asking, demanding,
Right.
are literally from CV High School. They're not from the other ones.
Got
The
it.
other ones are like, no, wait a minute.
So what you're saying is let's not apply solutions sort of across the board.
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that we're doing the one size fits all. In a way, yes, we're doing the one size fits all because a group that is talking about CV High School and demanding certain things we do there for whatever reason they have. And they're legitimate reasons of fear, of safety.
Sure.
Yes, okay,
Sure.
I'm willing to do that. But again, we're listening to a handful of people, not the majority that's actually out there.
Got
And
it.
that's a concern to me that we kind of overreact. We worry about the optics. We worry
Got it.
about people who say, well, we need to feel safe. Well, you want to feel safe or do you want to be safe? There's two different.
Got it. And what do you think then in from what you're saying? I mean, I'm hearing what you're saying and I want to know what you think about these ideas then for improvements in terms of maybe creating some criteria.
That's the point I made with this, that the weakness is we need a plan.
Got it.
Because the easiest thing for us would have done was to say, hey, let's hire 10 more security guys, put them out there and show them that we're doing something. It's kind of irresponsible. I think it's responsible to find out where the need is, what we actually want to do, what level of security we want in that case, and then come up with the plan. And then we can vote on it based on something that's actually going to be safe, not necessarily make people feel better.
Got it.
Joe, that's a great point. I mean, we have as part of our agenda today, we have a current safety components in place, right? Things that we practice every day at CV High School. There's 16 things that are to me very thorough, right? But if I wake up in the morning and I believe that I'm unsafe, I don't care if you have a list of 70 components. If in my mind I'm not safe, and then I'm not safe, right? And I think to the point that Joey's making, I think we need to look at what we have in place, and thank God we haven't had an experience, right? A tragic experience. But in that being said, we could do everything. But if somebody wakes up in the morning and comes with malicious intent from somewhere else, I don't care what we have.
Sure, of course.
Yeah. So my point being is, I believe, right, security is doing an amazing job by having relationships in place, getting to the bottom of certain situations efficiently because they have relationship with students. We continue to do the same, and I agree with Mr. Acuna. I don't believe that overreacting to certain uncertainties that we all feel every day we wake up is going to be a solution either.
Got it. Got it. So I just want to get reactions to now the improvements, because I think we've kind of looked at the strengths, and I appreciate everybody chiming in on that, and the weaknesses or the challenges, let's say. Let's be more positive. Let me be more positive. The challenges and then the improvements and sort of next steps. Do we agree with this idea of, and again, this is just trying to see who is in agreement and who has maybe a better idea for moving forward in terms of criteria. Do we need a plan or yes?
Jocelyn?
Sorry, Jocelyn.
Jocelyn, if you just want to chime in,
Yes,
please. Because like,
Sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna add, I think I think kind of goes along with the criteria, right? I think we need an assessment like that is aligned with our values, right? I think even stepping back, I think just making clear what our values as a district in terms of the culture that and I think we are somewhat clear, right? I feel like our restorative justice practices kind of are a statement of our values. But yeah, doing an assessment so that we can make those decisions a little bit better, I think it's important. So that we are not reacting, right? Like we made decisions based on data information, and if there's an assessment that we've had and we've established.
Got it. And ideally, this assessment, just in case, just moving forward with this idea, this assessment would be, who would participate in this assessment? How would you move forward with that? Ideally. Any thoughts on that?
I think our staff would present us with a plan, right? I think, or what some of the needs are, I think, and we're doing some of that today, right?
Exactly.
So I think taking this information in a report and bringing it back to us and saying what's feasible.
Okay.
But I also want to mention that I think this is also because we have a temporary fence up at CV High School, and I think that it's not reacting to what anybody says. It's just reacting to what needs to be done. And I just want to say that because there was a temporary fence put up, and if there was nothing going on, then we would not have a temporary fence. And I think we're trying to address that issue instead of having a temporary fence that makes our school look like a prison. That we're trying to address that to bring safety concerns back.
Got it. Yes. And we're going to address that, the fence in a minute. So I'm trying to get through these first. Yes. Perfect.
So I hope we're not going to go through each one of this one by one like this, because we're never going to get out of here. The question of a plan, there was a plan. There was a skeleton of a plan that Dr. Valentino presented to us that had several components, right? It's not fully detailed yet, but it had the components of the physical things that contribute to safety. It had the components of the social emotional things that contribute to safety. And then it had the components such as like the security or other measures, right, in terms of personnel security. So there is that much of a plan. What I thought this study session was going to get us to is to better understand and maybe add the details to one of the components, which was this idea that you have after all these on number 4, the metal detectors, because that was just presented to us in one agenda item with one vendor, and it was a yay or nay. And I believe what I heard from the discussion there, it's like, well, it's not just the yay or nay, it's what does it mean to have this? What are going to be additional from adding a metal detector? Does it require fencing? Does it require, what are the adaptations that we need to do to staffing? Like, what is the whole picture that we're talking about? And I thought that was the purpose of this study session, not to go through each of these things that we implemented already.
Yeah, I completely agree. And also, we keep hearing about making a security plan. To me, I find that absolutely ridiculous. We have a security plan. We have an amazing security director, along with amazing security guards that work and protect our children every day. And we have a list of things that we have in place, physical things that we have in place. And as Ms. Paz said, I believe that what happened in the reaction to the chaos of a lot of things that were going on at the time, right? Somebody came up with this grand idea that our kids were going to be safer if we had metal detectors everywhere. And they brought us staff in a very aggressive move, maybe not thinking it through, brought us a vendor and said, this is what it cost. They didn't talk about logistics, where they would put them. They didn't talk about the required manpower to staff one metal detector. You can't have just one guy looking at a camera and then also checking bags. You need a whole team around one security detector. And what are those demands? And what are you taking away from if you do have that, right? And what do you benefit from it? If somebody wanted to do an act of malice, they wouldn't go through the metal detector. They'd throw it over the fence. We're on a big footprint of land. Are we gonna build an 80-foot wall around the whole school? We're not. And so I want to make it very clear that CVUSD has an amazing security team in place with components that have worked, that are working, and thank God we haven't had an incident.
Got it. You know what? Let's do this. Since, and I don't know what you all think. I was planning, Ms. Paz, I was planning on going through each one of those points. And I realized that there are a lot of points. And as we're going through the first one, I realized that maybe we'll be here until very late. How about this? Let's go ahead and go over those points, but I'm going to read it out. Give me one or two things just that are sort of that you find are strengths, and then some challenges for each one, just so we can sort of go over and review what is already in place. And whether you think and you do, I mean, you obviously have a security plan in place, and it is obviously something that's important to you that we can see from this list. But again, every system has components that could use improvements, and that's why we're here to study and review those. So let's just go over them very quickly, just in a conversation. I don't have to write them up, and that way we can move forward faster. Is that okay? And then we'll move and talk more in depth about what Ms. Paz was saying, which is the new additional components that were proposed.
Can I ask, as you read these off, because I don't think we need to do anything more than read these off, is the only other thing is, as it gets hotter and we're coming to the end of the year, the question is, are we going to continue to check backpacks? And if we are, what does that look like? And how are we going to allow kids to get to class on time in the morning and not have them waiting as the weather gets hotter now going to the end of the year? And then, and I'm just going to offer what I think would probably work is some kind of a random inspection, so we can run through the line quicker.
Okay, so
yes. And all the other stuff is being done every day.
Got you. Yes, I understand, and I'm here to facilitate. I'm not here to make things go longer or go over things that you feel like you've already gone over. So let's do it that way, and we'll get to the backpacks and to some of the temporary things and the things that have been offered, the new components, the additional components that we want to explore. So let me just read off campus cameras, strengths, weaknesses.
Depends what you're talking about. What you're talking about? What are you talking about when you say campus cameras?
Campus cameras that you are already in place.
Yeah, but are we going to stop there? Are we going to move forward with other things?
What?
She's just calling that one out.
Now,
But I'm a strength. I'm actually a strength, right? It allows us to get information. It allows security to watch certain areas that might not have a lot of vigilance, right? So a strength.
But where are we going to place them? Where are we going to place them?
Well, we have them, right?
I don't
You already have them.
talking about. Are we talking about adding more?
Well, they
right now I'm talking about
Why not?
why not. So are you suggesting that
Well,
we should add
I
more?
run a scenario by you that someone brought to our attention the other
Yes.
day, that I like to go to Disneyland, and that they have metal detectors at Disneyland, so therefore I should be fine with putting metal detectors in our schools. Now, personally, I think it was more of a political, not a practical scenario, but let me run that scenario by you. People go to banks, they go to Costco, they go to Walmart, they go to the concerts, they go to dinner, and there's cameras everywhere. Video cameras as well as audio cameras. So why aren't we talking about putting cameras in the classroom? If we want to make our kids 100% safe, taking that scenario to its extent, why aren't we talking about putting cameras in the classroom to take care of the teachers that say that some of their students are disrespectful? We'll be able to see that as well. And we all know we had an incident the other day that happened that would have been helpful. That's taking that scenario that was thrown at me to that same extent. Now, I'm not sure if the person who made that comment would be supportive of putting cameras in the classroom, which, by the way, just to let you know, I'm not supportive of that. Because again, that's not a practical solution.
Right.
It's just something that you can say to.
And does it go along with your values? Does it go along with the values and your goals in terms of physical and mental security?
I was challenged that why can't I just be fine with metal? Why can't you be fine with cameras in the classroom? It's that same scenario. And again, this is what I'm talking about overreacting.
Well,
We,
Okay.
they come and they say things and they tell us things and we don't. That's
We can't
my.
take this stuff personal, Mr. Acuna, and I think we're just talking about these things. We're not talking about solutions yet. I think where we're I think we're not gonna get there yet. I said, you know, I think you're taking.
Would we put the scenario that if fights
Uh,
be okay with
I-
metal detectors? Like,
I think this, Mr. Acuna, I think you're taking that conversation somewhere else, and I'm just gonna say that because that's true. He's just quickly gonna go down the list and let us have this conversation in a good way.
Let me just interrupt because I like getting to the point. What I see happening, right, is the complexity of the reaction to the uncertainties that we're living in, right? In our community, in our county, in our state, in our country, right? And we have a half of our community. If we put up fences everywhere, half of the community is going to say, man, that's good. At least our kids are safe. And then the other half is going to say, oh my God, you don't have any fences, and we don't want our kids in prison. We shouldn't have fences everywhere. And then if something was to happen, right, with or without, one side could call on the other side and say, I told you so, right? And that's the problem that we have. It doesn't matter what we do, right? There's not one thing that we can do that's going to solve this problem. And I believe if we're going to go to a punitive type of reaction to this, and then we don't need restorative practices. And we're a school district that is committed, that has restorative practices in place that are being modeled across the country. And yet we're at this juncture because of uncertainties. And as Mr. Acuna is saying, everything can be an overreaction. And that's what is creating this discussion very early on. And I think as Ms. Paz is saying to me, what conversation should we be having?
Well, yes.
Because we already know that all this stuff we're doing, right? We have a temporary fence. That's the only thing that's temporary. We're backpack checking, right? And then the other thing is, are we or not going to put metal detectors? No, that's what we should be talking about.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, yes.
Yeah,
Garcia.
so I hear us talking about certain sides having viewpoints. When is the last time we've surveyed our communities like fully to hear? Because I know that people have come to board meetings and I know that there have been comments. Do we know the consensus of our communities? If we haven't surveyed them fully, then we're not really sure. And we're going to be guessing or assuming one or the other. If we don't survey our community, we're not really sure.
Got it.
And there is a plan in place with Dr. Valentino to send out surveys.
Again, this is the hard part. That's why governing is so hard. We have what's called panorama survey currently right now, but a handful of people do them. It's not like everybody's getting everybody's opinion. So the group that decides they're all going to get online and do it are the ones that are going to have their voices heard, so to speak. And that's, again, goes back to the hard part. I, like most of you, talk to people in the community, at work, in the store. I get stopped all the time at the store, just asking questions and stuff. And there's a variety of opinions out there. And again, I go back to that point, is that we are sometimes driven by the people who come here and demand things or say something. Again, they have the right to come, and I'm happy that they come, especially when the students come. I may not agree with them, but I'm happy that they're getting involved. But there's a larger group out there that to arrogantly say, I come up and say, well, I represent all the students at CV High School. Well, that's not really true. You represent the group that you know or you talk to, just like we do, right? I'm the same way. I talk to groups of people. So even a survey, I mean, we have to multiple ways of getting information and how we can get this and what the community feels like. Again, you go to West Shores, they have a very different view. You know that. They have a very different view of what's happening over here at CV High School. So,
And just if I may, so some of the answers to some of the extremes that we're bringing up here that we're not talking about right now, but that you experience, you hear from parents, some of those answers are basically, here are our values. Does that match with our values? Does does putting cameras inside our classroom match with the values that we profess in our school? If the answer is no, then it's no. That's what I would say about that. Now, let's continue with some of these, and maybe, I'm checking the time and I'm mindful of the time and I appreciate your engagement. Thank
Can I
you.
interrupt you?
Yes.
Because you just said something that's very important about the values, right? And making our decisions from those values. But then we're going to continue and go through this. I mean, why don't we have a conversation about what our values are? What does safety look like? I mean, so that we're not reacting, so that we're not making a decision. Like if we can get clear, one of our values is safety, and I see it across all of our campuses, right? What does that even look like? What makes you feel safe? If you can tell me when when you wake up in the morning, I was like, man, I feel safe today, or no, I don't. And what do you think about? I mean, that's an interesting question, right? About the.
Let's talk about safety. Let's open it up. Let's talk about safety. Want to talk about safety? Let's talk about safety.
Yeah.
What does it mean to you? What does it look like?
It's such an abstract, we would be here for 47 hours talking about what safety is.
I can tell you what I think about safety. I think about shelter, that I have a place where I can live and I'm safe. I can tell you that it's food security, that I have food at my table. That's safety for me.
Basic needs.
Got it. So that's one level, the basic needs, right? Safety.
That I have a person I can depend on, right? My emotional needs, that I can talk to someone who respects me, values me, shows me that they care. That's safety.
And thank you for sharing that. And others of you, what do you think when you think of safety?
Well, when I think of school safety, I think of a place where students can go with the least amount of interruptions.
What do you mean interruptions?
Well, things that happen, like you get different disciplinary actions that take place, or messages or lockdowns, right? We've had a number of lockdowns, with the least amount of interruptions, right? We want, because especially right now, we're trying to push kids to graduate, and we have them waiting in line in the morning, and they're getting their second period, so they've already missed one period when we're trying to get as many students to graduate. I think, to me, safety is having a setting where students have the least amount of interruptions so that they can focus on their education.
I get that. And then I'm wondering, well, how realistic when you're saying interrupt? I'm interrupted all day, and that doesn't make me less safe, right? I have 3 kids. I lead an organization. I'm part of boards. Every day I'm working on something. We're talking about safety. We started with safety. So I'm just giving what is realistic, and isn't it the ability to deal with interruptions, right? How do we handle, if we're getting, if in the school setting, if you're going there, it's how are we preparing our students?
So maybe how we can minimize the interruptions and how we can deal with the interruptions so that they're not so disruptive. So both minimizing and dealing with interruptions. Okay. And these are sort of, I would say, sort of applications of safety, like in the school, right? Like we're talking here, these are more broad and this is more like in the school setting. Okay, either safety within the school, what does that mean to you? What does that look like?
If a student or staff feels unsafe, they know where to go to get help. How fast can they get help? Do they know where to go?
Got it. Where to get help? Yeah. Is that clear? That needs to be clear. If they need help, where to go to get help. Yeah. Other meanings of safety.
So it depends what perspective you're looking at it from. If you're a student, safety and security means one thing. If you're staff, it means something else. If you're a parent, it might mean something totally different. If you're someone in the community that maybe doesn't have any kids, but it's around a school, it may, I mean, I can tell you what as a parent, still a parent, my son's out of high school already, but
Tell me.
he was in high school. I mean, I know what security means, but, you know, but again, this goes back to the hard part about our job is to try to find that balance, that sweet spot of everybody's kind of concerns and balancing out, not tipping the pendulum to one side or to the other side.
So
Can't
what's,
have free reign, but again, you don't want to have a prison either. So
got it. Let's talk about the sweet spot of safety in the school. What would be the sweet spot then in this?
and again, going back to your list, most of these things we generally agree on, I think. We're in the process of doing them. It's just a matter of getting them done. So, I mean, we're talking about the doorbell system, which again goes back to another problem we have in our school. Some of our schools are newer and some of our schools are older. So the newer schools were built with a very different mentality. They were built with certain safety features. Older schools were built to bring people in, to invite people, not to kick them out. So what we have to do in those things, going back to that one size fits all thing that doesn't work, that's a safety thing as well. All four of our high schools are built differently, you know, and it goes back to that. So the sweet spot is somehow where people can feel relatively secure. If you're talking about simply school safety, that students feel secure without being intimidated, without being targeted. Teachers and staff need to feel like if something happens that they're protected and we hold others accountable, and not only necessarily students, but others, adults as well, accountable. So there's that. Parents want to make sure that their kids are safe and that everybody in the schools are doing what they're supposed to be doing. I'm just using this as my example, being a parent and growing up in this district and going through the schools.
So, okay, so it's interesting. So it's that sweet spot would be like feeling secure versus feeling targeted. Like that would be, so the sweet spot is then feeling secure as a student. And what does that look like then?
Back to the point of you want to feel secure, you want to be secure.
But I'm not sure what point you're trying to make with that. Like, so
Well, some people won't feel secure, and I'll use Mr. Otherlund as an example until there's RSOs on the campus. And I don't say that in a negative way. I've known him all my life. He's always been very supportive of that. I don't question that he's doing it from a sincere point. But in his mind, that's how people would feel safe. Now, on the other hand, anybody that knows me for as long as they've known me, known that I've taken an opposite position.
Got it.
I don't discount his position because I know it's sincere. I know he's not doing it just to do it, because I've known him all my life for the most part. But therein lies what makes you feel safe and what makes you be safe, right?
Got it. So for you, that going too far would be the RSS. And I don't want to get too much into that because that's not what we're discussing today. But yeah, other things that are related in terms of security that relate to the values of your school and of your school district in terms of security. And you can talk in general, like Mr. Acuna is talking about sort of, you know, this sweet spot between feeling secure and not targeted. Other thoughts on that?
So I think one of the is wellness centers that we implemented, right, where the students know if they're having issues, that's a place to start, right? The wellness centers.
The wellness centers.
Wellness
Yes.
centers that we have our high school and middle schools. Right, so
These are like safe spaces, safe.
correct.
Got it.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. Okay.
Just want to disagree with you when you separate support systems outside of the school system. Support systems should be in our schools and in our values, part of it, as well as the network and.
Got it. Thank you for pointing that out. Yes, yes, those are also part of the, can definitely be, you brought it up from a personal point of view, but they definitely fit within the school system. Yes. Thank you. Anything else in terms of
Can I-
safety and the values of the school?
I was gonna add, Jocelyn.
Thank you.
Jocelyn, I was gonna add, I'd say like a culture of trust. I feel like some of the and I'm trying to be careful with how I explain this, but I feel like maybe some of our reactions or our sentiments around safety can also be rooted in a lack of trust. So there's like I already know you're out to get me sentiment, so I don't feel like I can trust you with my safety, or I don't know if that quite explains.
Where do you think that lack of trust is coming from?
It's communication.
Communication. Okay,
lack of communication.
sorry. Lack of communication. Thank you. It's hard to hear from them. So communication and lack of communication, that's this lack of trust that you're feeling. Okay. Any, yeah, any more thoughts on that? Yeah.
I think it's also important, like, I think it was mentioned earlier, but I think that something that comes to mind is like our coping mechanisms. Like, I feel like, and maybe this is us reacting to the times, right? Our response to certain things might not be appropriate, but I don't know if it's just because of the environment that we're in, right? So if we're in a heightened environment every single day, then our response is going to be very reactionary. So how do we establish, tools where we can not self-regulate, but we can better adjust or respond appropriately to certain things?
And when you're talking about us, you're talking specifically about the board members or in general?
I think just in general.
In general, coping mechanisms and reactions. How would you suggest to kind of, to her point, what would you suggest?
I have an observation that I've made. When there's been incidences in our campuses, whether it's fights or whatnot, the fight is broken up. The students are, dealt with, but things continue, right? Like we run our schools as if nothing happened. And I think, I don't say that as in a bad thing. It's just like as educators, right? We're following a pacing guide. We're following, we have a schedule. We're already behind where we should be. And there's the testing around the corner. So we haven't built, let's just stop. Right? Why is it that we don't just stop and have a conversation about what's happening? I mean, if I have a traumatic situation in my family, I can't continue. I need to bring, my children and help them understand and process what happened and how we're going to be okay or what we're going to do or different things. But in our school system, we have these incidences that, we get videos, people are reacting, it interrupts the learning process.
Well, I think
But our school doesn't stop.
that's the answer. I mean, that it's true. We're not dealing in a small space. You have 2,800 children, right? And we have certain purpose why we show up to school, right? To go to school and try to prepare kids to go to college and for them to learn and to test well. And when you have these interruptions, it's almost like you can never get to the root of why kids are reacting that way, because there's something else that has to be finished by the end of the day, by the end of the week, by the end of the year. So it becomes a very complicated situation. It's very different. You said you have 3 children. You can sit down, figure it out and go forward. We're talking 2,800 children. You have a bunch of different things going on. You have a schedule. So in your answer, I mean, theoretically, yeah, good idea, but can it practically be done? Probably not, right? And that's probably why it seems like we just keep pushing to the end, right?
And I think it's also, it's also perception. To your point, things are moving on. We are doing other things as well as we're doing this. It just seems like we're not. That list that they gave us of things to review, well, yes, those are things that we're doing to make the school safe. For most of those things that we've already approved that are moving forward. The fencing issue, which we kind of tied up, we've already been talking about that. We've been working on that for years. We just need to finish up the actual, not the bids, but the renderings of what the engineering, what it's actually going to look like. All these things we're doing, but it seems because of all the other things that's happening, we're not doing anything. But the school goes on. Kids are still getting taught. They're gonna mostly all of them will hopefully all of them will graduate, and things are moving on. But it's the perception. That list proves, like Board Member Gonzalez said, staff's doing a good job. They can't do everything all at once, and the board members call them and yell at them too. I mean, that's part of this whole thing, but things are getting done. And so the perception is that we have this meeting because there's some big emergency that we have to do it today, and no, things are getting done. And again, yeah, there's certain issues that we need to talk about, going back to your point about
Which we will.
the metal detectors or whatever they want to call them. They have nice names now, not to call them metal detectors, but I think that's I think it's on us too, to communicate that to parents. Things are happening. Projects are getting done. We have approved all these things. We have done the funding. There's a few of them that we're waiting back, but it seems like, we don't do anything. And then when we do something, then, well, the staff, it's all on the staff now because that's not the case.
Got it. And
People are doing their jobs. It's just we get into this climate of crisis.
And I do think, and I think we here agree that, the staff and everyone is doing their best to deal with these situations in these times in the larger context that we've already mentioned. What Ms. Paz was mentioning was this kind of this something that you have to deal with every day in school, right? It's like a train that's moving. You have to get them to the next test, the next school, the next year, and then there's crisis happening, and maybe that crisis is not, or it doesn't feel like there's a moment that's been being taken to acknowledge the crisis, to
And
it just becomes normal,
yeah,
like you said.
to add on to what Trustee Paz was saying, I think she brought up a very good point, right? We come from a community of trauma. We come from a community of struggles. Right, our parents, they can't be involved. They're working, breaking their back to make sure that they put food on the table. They're not engaged, or they don't engage as much as they wish they could. They can't supervise their children.
Language.
Right, the language barrier, immigration status, and fear, and engaging with institutions, and all these different challenges that we as a community have faced through history, and causing trauma and crisis within our community, right? That we are reacting, right? As everyone is saying here, we are reacting to actions, we are reacting to events, that we don't take the time to really sit down and really think about the root cause of all these issues, all these behavioral issues, right? And I go back to my experience as a young student, right? And growing up with all these kids. I think that I was very lucky and fortunate enough that I had mentorship, that I had somebody to guide me, right? But I could have, my path could have been a whole lot different if I didn't have those folks that guided me, and right, I could have joined a gang, not gone to college, and continued to work in a job that I found here, and there's all these, right, endless possibilities, right? But I think ultimately, and as I try to wrap my head around this, nobody in their nature, their human nature, wants to be a bad person. Nobody wakes up. Once you're far off, right? Once you're far off, and there's no going back. Bad people are created, right? But I think as we go through this thing called life, and we go through this education system, nobody wakes up in their mind and wants to be a bully, right? They don't come to school with bad intentions. These are learned behaviors that are learning somewhere else in the community. So how do we, us as a school district, tackle those deep-rooted issues that are within the community, right? That are way beyond our reach of bringing in more campus security assistance, of installing cameras, right? How can we develop a really comprehensive plan with all stakeholders, teachers, staff, county, cities, different, government agencies, that we come around and we look at this as in a humane way, right? That we approach this out of love and compassion for our people and our students.
Got it. And thank you for sharing. That's very touching and appropriate share, because this is the community, and your journey reflects, what the journey of these kids, is I'm sure. Now, so there's, yes, and of course, I think we all agree, there are just, huge outside external forces, society that is kind of forcing all of this upon us. And this is why we're having this conversation. But there's also, like you said, the trauma of many of the kids. Immigration is a sort of trauma, even if it's from generations past, it's a sort of trauma. And all of the things associated with it that we won't get into right now. But I believe you have a wellness program here, and I thought it was at Joven Noble also is here as well. So are you okay, so that's one thing. So are those, and that wasn't necessarily the topic today, but I think it is important because we are talking about those values that we have in the school and how to sort of implement these physical security measures that continue to stay within the values of the school and that match what you want ultimately for these kids, right? Mentally and for their overall wellness, right? So are you saying that those components today are not necessarily working as well as they could? Or are you saying maybe school-wide, aside from, additionally to those programs, there should be, because I think it's really impactful what you just said, Mr. Gonzalez, that if you don't stop, recognize, and take a beat, take a moment to say, this is not normal. This happened to us. This is trauma. And just recognize it becomes normalized. That's what you said under your breath. And I heard you.
Yeah, no, and just to add what Adonis, I think he shares a story of another layer of the complexity of why we don't feel safe, right? But again, back to what we're doing, we have all these conditions. And if you look at what's happened across the country, you've had people that come from another community, another state with a gun, right? With the intent of hurting an Asian community, a certain denomination of church, Black people, Mexican people, literally going and showing up to hunt people, right? So aside from all the things that we have to deal with, right? Which again, it's a 30-hour conversation. We're dealing with the reality of the uncertainty and the lack of predictability in where we're at as humanity in this country, right? Where people are willing to take a gun as if it was a video game and just indiscriminately hurt people as fast as they can with as many rounds as they can, right? And I think that's what we all fear, right?
So how do we move forward in terms of not allowing this to become?
Sometimes being afraid is the problem, right? I can believe there's a green dragon in my house every day. And if I believe it, it's real, right? So this reaction, right?
But this is something you can control, right? Let's focus on what we can control. What we can, but this, you can't, and you're right. And you've told me before, Mr. Gonzalez, and rightly so. We can't, some people are going to be afraid no matter what, right? And some people are going to, there's no 100% security as we.
I think Mr. Cunha's touched on that.
I'm just gonna say, look, let's go back to what Board Member Boss said, and it's true. What are our values, right? Well, we have our values. We wrote that down in our value statements and our priorities. And at a certain point, and again, we have new board members. We have a couple of new board members, so they weren't there when we actually voted these in. But we made a conscious decision, not just a conscious decision to turn from what we would consider a punitive direction to a restorative one. That is what we decided. So when I vote on these things, and again, and I'll use it as an example because everybody knows, is an RSO on campus compatible with the values of a restorative practices program? I would say no. Now that's just my opinion. So those are the values that I choose to see what do we do? To what extent do we kind of corral the liberties and the privacies and all those security issues based on the value? So my value that I judge off of is what we agreed on, which was the restorative practices. And that's why when we talk about safety, we almost have to talk about the wellness centers, the restorative justice, the blended model, and the programs that we have. And yes, we need to reflect on those every year and make sure if we're doing them right or reboot them like we're gonna be doing again. But so that's, again, when we can go down that list and, putting a buzzer at the door, I think is okay. It's compatible with our restorative practices things. Okay, those things I agree with. But for me, and just speaking on my side, because I get one vote out of the 7, I have to draw a line somewhere where we start going to where I believe that they're not incompatible, or in my mind, nobody's convinced me that they're compatible yet.
Got it. So I would say, let's keep those that you all know well. Let's keep those values in mind, and let's jump into the conversation that I know you want to talk about, which is, let's talk about, first of all, some of the temporary security measures that you have in place, and then go into the additional proposed components. Is everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Because I do want to dive right into that. And we have had a very insightful and very interesting conversation about safety that I think we also should keep in mind. So let's go ahead and jump in. Let's talk about fences. Let's talk about the fences, the temporary fences first, right? So somebody already gave me some feedback on the fences, and I think it was Mr. Arredondo. What did you say about the fences?
Well,
please?
I said that the temporary fence, right, makes our school look like a prison. And I said that it takes too much time to take our students through that line. Right now, we're trying to get our students to graduate, and school for some students doesn't start till 8:30, 9 o'clock. So for me, the temporary fence, needs to come down. And we need to think about other ways to, and I think, through.
I support motion. That's easy.
So yeah, so there's two things. They look ugly, and they kind of and they make it look like, I don't want to misspeak. You said
I said it makes it look like a prison.
makes it look like a prison, and it's also making kids late, right? Because it's sort of corralling the entrance, right? Okay, so yeah, there's lateness, prison. I mean, these are very negative. Is there any positive to the fence, to the temporary fences?
Control exit and entry points.
Anything else?
So the fences, this temporary fence was, again, a reaction to people demanding that we do something.
Got it.
That and checking the bags, because again, as I stated before, there's a plan in place to put an actual fence,
Okay.
and not a chain link, but an actual nice fence that we have been talking about for a while, that was in the process. So that's gonna happen. My understanding is they just needs to be back to the board to approve, once it's all engineered and done, and it's gonna happen. So
It is
going
everyone.
back to this entry point, it's going to happen eventually.
Okay.
As soon as they get that up. So the temporary fence, again, was my opinion, a reaction to that. And
It's
again,
temporary.
so the other fence is gonna be coming, so the discussion in the sense is, I'm taking it down or putting it up, it's,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying?
So,
It's I
kind
don't
of-
say it's irrelevant. I just say that's a separate thing. The question would be, when we actually get the regular fence in,
Yes.
what is gonna be the mode of entry? How are we
Right.
gonna get our kids in and out? Are we gonna have the
Got it.
same
So it
one
sounds-
line? Are we gonna open all the gates and let them come through? Or
Got it.
that's a policy. And again, we could take the policy that happens at Desert Mirage, which already has that almost single entry that seems to be working over there. I mean, yes, things happen over there too,
No,
but
let's talk about that. Let me open that up. Sorry, but I appreciate you bringing that up. Let's talk about this new, because in a way, you're right. The temporary fence is sort of a moot point because it's temporary. So it's gonna come down. So by nature, it's temporary. Now let's talk about putting up the new fence then. Let's talk about that. What do you think what do you need, I guess? Or what do you want to know are we in agreement? Is everyone in agreement with the new fence? Or what are some of the challenges that in your mind that they're popping up?
I want to go back, before we go forward.
Sure.
Adonis, I agree with Mr. Arredondo, right? I don't know how you feel, but I think it'd be important to pull or at least have an idea of how the board members feel so that we decide what we're going to do with the temporary fencing. The idea of the permanent fencing, it's been a conversation in our facilities committee meetings, and it is going forward. I believe it's third phase of work that's already started. And so it's going to get done. We're hoping that it's something that is appealing architecturally and that it's strategically put in the right place. And I think, as Mr. Acuna said, we're going to have to decide how our children move in and out of school once that fence is in place. But right now at CV High School, I don't know why, but there seems to be fences on top of fences on top of strings on top of fences. But hopefully when we put up that fence, we'll bring down a lot of the interior fences and it won't be as hostile as you move around the school. But again, I think the question of how we're going to control the entrance and the exit out of the school are going to be discussions that we need to have once we have the permanent fence up.
Those discussions need to include transportation because our kids get dropped off in the back as well as the front on the sides. And so it's, again, Desert Mirage is a little different. Even West Shore is a little different, their entry and their exit points because of the way they were built. But CV High School, again, because of it's a transportation issue of where our kids come in through. Where do our staff come through? Our staff park in a different area. They come through a whole separate door. Are those doors, and we know sometimes they get left open accidentally or whatever. How do we, going back to that, again, CV High School is a very different one of how we have to discuss that. But the fence in the front was done to be able to not have that gate in the front where the guards are at, to be able to control people coming in and out of the campus, right? That's okay.
Got it.
But putting the front one up
Maybe
solve the problem that we have like all the way around that huge campus.
Got it. Yeah. Did you want to add something, Jocelyn?
Yeah, I mean, maybe the fencing at some of the sites is beneficial considering some of the incidents in the community as well. So just thinking of some of the other school sites that are maybe more in like a residential area. I mean, not that to say that I love the fencing, but I think the fencing could help in that way of just keeping some of the incidents that are happening out in the community from entering the site, or it might be more beneficial to control.
Got it. Sorry, it's not easy to hear you, but yes. Okay. Yeah, I understand. So like sort of, it also helps to keep out whatever might be happening outside of the school, kind of keep it out. Okay. So it sounds like this is something that's kind of, everybody's sort of in agreement, but if I were to just resume, some of the things that you still need to decide on are sort of entry points, how many, where, transportation issues, and aesthetics. How are you going to make it look pretty? Do we want to delve deeper into that?
No, I think,
At this point,
no, I think that's up to engineering and architecture.
so it sounds like this is sort of like a ball that's sort of rolling already, and you will be deciding.
And that's just the fence for CV High School though, but fences in general, well, there's safety issues. Most of them that we have are maintenance issues. They're not necessarily safety issues where we need a fence here, where the fence got broken down or it's old, or we used to have 4-foot fences when we didn't fear the community so much. When we weren't afraid of our kids and our parents, we had 4-foot fences. Well, now we have to make those large or taller. And so, I mean, those are more, again, they are safety issues, but they are more in the realm of maintenance that they need to kind of go through and say, hey, this doesn't look good. We need to fix this and kind of that. So again, a lot of those issues are being dealt with, and again, are being dealt with because we sit on facilities and we hear it, are being dealt with. But those other fences, again, I, like everybody else, would like to things go a lot faster, but there's a process, there's a bureaucracy that runs through government, and we understand that. I mean, we have to ask the state sometime to get a dang shade structure, right? Those kind of things. So
Are there any questions or issues that the fences, I think let's move on from the fences. Let's move on to the backpacks, the backpack inspection right now. The backpack inspection is another temporary measure, I believe. From what I have gotten some information about it, but I want to know from your point of view, how is that working?
So I witnessed it a couple times, and I think the other thing is time, right? Because you're looking in the backpack. So, but some students, as I was told by staff, well, students know that you're going to check the bags every day, so they're going to put things somewhere else, and that was the reaction from staff, and so and they don't want them every day, right? They want them every now and then, so they can see kind of what's coming into the school. But for me, it's a time thing, right? Where we don't have enough staff there checking bags, and then it becomes a cost issue, right? But I
It was a different training. Yeah, I think we should stop backpack checks. If you're thinking we should stop backpack checks, I think we should stop
well,
backpack checks.
like I said, it's time, right?
Yeah.
Right now we're in crunch time, and it's sort of. But I do want to say that I think it was done because of the incidents that were happening there, right? Reacting to what was happening there, and they did help in terms of. I don't think we've had an incident, Dr. Valentino. We've had one incident, right? With having the backpack check. So I don't want to take away from staff's intention, but I do want to say at this time, it seems that there's a lot going on.
And then we also have our the canines coming in, right? So and those do come in on a random occasion.
And are you saying that that would replace the
No,
backpack? or
it
that
doesn't. They go hand in hand, right?
Hand in hand,
They go
okay,
hand in hand.
yes, go ahead.
I want to go back to our values, right? And what Cunha was talking about, because we're going to stop or make the decision that needs to be made, but ultimately, I think, what is it that was happening? So a student showed up with something, right? And then we identified the student and what happened to the student. I don't know that the backpack check itself or the temporary fencing itself is helping us get to the root cause. Like, did anyone wonder what is making a segment of our population show up? Because that's what, with the restorative justice practices, we want to prevent, right? We want to understand. We want to make sure so that that is not happening. But the measures that we have in place, and when you're talking, are they in alignment with our values? It's like, well, we did them because something happened and we dealt with it. But I don't know that it made us any better or that our values were implemented in the process, because by now we should have been like, okay, these are the students, we've talked to them and we understand the reasons why. And maybe these are some things that would help prevent, like we don't have any of the other. All we have is, one other incident happened.
And
I don't know.
And I think something that's important to note at this conversation is that we did react to something that we thought happened, right? Because after the reports came out, we were informed that some of these reports were in fact false reports.
Many of them.
Right? There was no findings to the reports where a student with a gun or a student with a knife, and the time that we put the fence up. It was one of those times that we reacted to a false report yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah, it sounds like the whatever is in place now is either not addressing the what is real versus what ends up being the reality. Or what is perceived versus what is the reality. Yeah.
I think too that what I'm hearing from my colleagues is everybody's taking this personal, and it's personal to all of us. But I think as a board, the way I'm seeking it is security and safety for our staff, students, and families, right? And it's not. I think that we're on the right path, but if there are other measures that we're trying to add, right, for everybody to feel safe, I think that's the focus, and it's not whether as a board member I'm making that I feel that we're making the wrong decision or not. It's not about that. This is not a personal in terms of attacking board members. It's just, what does our safety plan look like? What are the things we're going to add, right? Or things we're going to do differently. And I think that's the conversation today.
Yeah, so exactly. So we're talking about the backpack check. What I hear so far is it needs to stop. We don't have enough staff for it. We have not addressed necessarily the deeper issues. Instead, was sort of a reaction. And perhaps this perception that it is working it's working in relation to what, really? Like, we're not really sure, because some of those reports apparently seem to have been false. So, okay, so would you be comfortable just stopping the backpack checks, or what would replace that?
Well, I'm just gonna say this, of course, I don't have the votes, right? But I'm always in favor of having an NSR on campus. But I respect the fact that, I'm outvoted, and I respect for how people feel. But for me, right, having a presence there of a law enforcement officer will deter some stuff from coming on campus, right? And that's how I feel.
Got it. And I appreciate that. And, again, we're not voting on anything today, and I appreciate you giving me your thoughts. And I know that others disagree with you and all of that. But are there any other ways to sort of to replace or to make this backpack inspection? If it goes away, would you be comfortable with it? Would you feel?
I think random backpack sweeps, right?
Maybe a random.
Where maybe it's not at the entry point, but they pick certain classrooms just like they do with the canines, and hey, backpacks out.
I wouldn't support that.
Would that be considered targeting?
No, I would say
Do it
random.
to
classes.
put one in every 5
No, but I wouldn't say to every person. It's just random classrooms.
Well, that could just be standard suspicion, right? And I would put that responsibility on our professional staff that does that, right? If there was an engagement, something happens, somebody's behaving erratically, our security is going to get to the bottom of it. I wouldn't support the idea of targeting. I would support the idea, if we were going to keep the fence, I would support the idea of a random check, just because it's going to get hotter. But I agree that we should get rid of the backpack inspection, and I believe that we should get rid of the fence.
Mhm.
And I think as we go forward, we get to think about this as we move forward. And I think we need to also understand that our solution to what we feel is secure, we've already witnessed that circumstances create how we feel and how we react, right? So it's going to keep moving, it's going to keep changing. I think for now, I know that in high school, sometimes at the end of the year, they don't let you bring a backpack. Maybe we do that the last 2 weeks. We don't let anybody bring a backpack at the end of 2 weeks. But whatever. I think enough of the backpack checking. I agree with Mr. Arredondo, and I don't like that temporary fence either.
I think we had talked about the clear backpacks as well. We had talked about the clear backpacks as well. I saw the backpack checks as kind of like a immediate response to give us some time to plan things out, to think about other solutions. Dr. Valentino has a plan, that takes more than just a couple weeks, right? And so I saw the backpack checks as gives us a little bit of time to think through these.
Justin, I think it seems, in theory, it seems like a good idea, but I think there's certain personal stuff that women, young girls carry around that needs to be in their mind personal. That's one. Two, if you have a clear backpack, you're not going to put something in it that they're going to see, right? And if you're going to do something, you're not going to put it in a clear backpack, much like in these points that the kids are coming in and out of school right now. If they have something they're going to hurt somebody with, they're not going to put it in their backpack, because they're not going to walk through a line where they know they're going to check, right? So it goes back to how we feel, what makes us feel comfortable. And then at the end, is it really working, or is it really practical when you get to the bottom of it?
Yeah, I'd say, I guess with that in mind, my only thought is, let's just make sure we have something in place so that we're not going back with no safety measures, and now we're having to deal with, responding to something and not allowing for the time to plan and stuff.
So what do others think of this random backpack check?
My recommendation would just be from here on out to add 3 security supervisors or security assistants to staff there to help with supervision there. So that would be, well, at least till the end of the year.
So that's your, what do others think about that?
Well, I
Adding
don't know where that number comes from. I would.
Campus security
I
assistance.
would ask the professionals that we have doing this, do they need 3 more security? I heard we need more women security guards at CV High School.
They're here. We
So,
can ask
no,
them.
I understand, and I think that's the question for them. right?
Would you like to respond? Would you like to respond?
How about just at the head of the table there?
Oh.
There you go.
Mike's.
Yeah, she needs a mic.
They interrogated.
I know. I know, just.
Yeah, he should be up here anyway. Bunnies. Not gonna be here at 9 o'clock.
No, we won't. All right, so we're talking about adding more campus security assistance in order to sort of replace or move forward, without sort of, we're saying, okay, let's stop. It has to stop the backpack checks because there's not enough staff, et cetera. Mr. Arredondo just suggested, let's add 3 campus security assistants, maybe. What is your response to that? Is that enough? Do you think what do you think of that? You're the expert and this is where you.
So I understand we're having a conversation. So, and I'll relate this to the law enforcement world because I did some research in relation to this, and the ratio to population to a law enforcement officer is 1,000 to 1. So that's usually the ratio. But there is no data that shows that in a school setting, campus security assistance with students and staff, I did not find any data that exists. It's based on need of the site. And there is concern that there is a need for more female campus security presence because there has been an increase in incidents involving female students. So we did add campus security assistants to rolling to attack that issue because that gives us the ability to not only supply them to CV High School, but also address issues district-wide.
Do we need any more?
So we added two female to CV High School?
Well, 2 roving, yes, they are not female.
Okay. So we still need, I run into the security detail almost every day, and I kind of sit there and chat with them, and they brought it up more than once that they need more female security personnel to address the situation with I guess female incidents or something like that.
It would help.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, and what do you think about what Mr. Arredondo recommended to adding campus security assistance at the check-in level, or like when they're coming in, instead of having the backpack checks, just to have. Is that what you were saying? Sorry, I did.
I just said that there should be.
Got it.
Presence.
Got it. Sorry about that. Yes.
Campus.
Thank you for the correction. Yes,
But
just
you-
to add them to the campus.
You feel with the condition of the school right now that we need more security guards at CV High School?
I would have said that maybe 2 months ago.
Okay.
But right now it seems like things are calmed down, perhaps because it's the end of the school year.
Yes.
And I hear radio traffic and it seems like there are incidents, but not like it was a couple months ago. And that's not only for CV, but also district-wide. Okay.
Are you satisfied with that answer?
Oh, because I just spoke to staff there at CV High School and, I feel like I respect what he has to say, but, I know there has been more incidents with, females, there at CV High School, and I feel like we need more staff. And in replace of backpack checks, you would have additional staff to see the entry points as to where they're coming. So I'm not satisfied, but I respect what.
Well, what I'm hearing is that needs fluctuate depending on what's happening, right? And absence of
expert.
a ratio, which we can find one, and maybe we can continue looking into that. I mean, throwing in 3 versus 4 versus 5, right? It's a very random request. But I am interested in continuing to do the research and continuing to be attuned to, I mean, seasonally, I think the staff know, right? Like, is it the springtime? Is it there's summer? Is it when that our students tend to be a little more antsy and tired and things like that? But that's what I'm hearing. It's just it.
Well, I mean, he is the expert.
Yeah,
He's
exactly. Yeah.
he's the professional. He's our director of security. And I agree. I think needs change, right? This is organic. And I think if he wakes up one day and says, I need more female security guards, or I need 10 more because of the condition, and then we have to have and take that on. But I'm gonna listen to what the gentleman, that's why you show up to work, right? That's why you do what you do for us. And I'm gonna respect that, right? So
let me play devil's advocate. Why would you hesitate to add? Like, what would be the downside of adding? Because if I look at it from like an outsider's point of view, I would say, well, heck, more campus security assistance, the better.
I don't believe
But
that. I'm
let's-
violating.
Answer. What do you think?
So I'm never gonna say not to add more people to our team. I'm never gonna say that. What I'm getting at is that exactly, we're reacting to the need. And like I said, a couple of months ago, there was an increase not only at CV High School, but district-wide, as we all felt. If we were adding district-wide, yes, to CV, we are already addressing that issue by adding the 2 positions, and I can assign them to CV. But I also have the flexibility that if there is a need at other sites, that I can direct their attention to that.
Got it. Got it. Thank you for playing along with my devil's advocate. Okay, interesting. So yeah, so you want that flexibility to be able to have the extra, if you have those 2 that you can move around, because you agree with both Ms. Paz and Mr. Gonzalez about how there are times where it is more needed, and it's sort of like you're trying to adapt to it according to what is happening in the school.
Yes.
And is that something that you already know ahead of time, or is that something that you're reacting to? Like, or is it something like Ms. Paz suggested, like maybe, we know when the students are more antsy, like, is it like, springtime, or, are you adapting according to what is happening in the moment? Or both, maybe, I don't know.
So there's trends. There's trends leading to festivals that are nearby in our city and in our district. And so you see trends not only that impact internally, but externally. Items are being brought to our district. So when those festivals are present, there's trends, but there's also trends that are migrating from middle school to high school because there's history between students, and those are just disagreements between groups, between individuals, and that's we see increase in fights because of fill in the blank.
Got it. Got it. Thank you for that. So in this discussion, we have talked about the backpack situation. It needs to, it's going to stop. We're going to, or it's going to stop, but some of the
Real quick,
suggestions,
can
yes.
Respect, can you stop saying it's going to stop? Because we haven't, it hasn't been decided.
You are correct.
There are a group of us that one way or the other. And I
You
just
are-
don't want to give anybody the impression that we've already voted and we've decided and we've done it. And again,
Thank you.
I'm supportive in the way too, but I'm just saying it's just to be clear, because then
You are
look,
correct.
we're gonna get attacked no matter what.
Thank you.
They're busy on social media already talking crap about us, and that's fine. But I think it's our job to make sure that it's clear where
Yes.
we're at.
My
and what we're
apologies.
doing. And again, no,
Correct.
I'm just saying that for that reason is that
course.
we haven't made that decision yet.
Of course,
We
let's be
haven't
clear.
decided to add or not add or anything, but I
Here's some
don't
of the-
want people getting the impression that, oh, look, they're taking all that down. Look, we're all gonna die now because they're taking down the fence. So just.
Thank you.
Just.
Thank you. Thank you. You're right. You're right. So where we're at with the backpack inspection is that we are saying that it takes a lot of time. There's not enough staff, and moving forward, we're going to consider maybe moving away from that.
I
and going to
think
something.
I think that's part of it, but I believe the reason that I support not checking the backpack, it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the fact that what the gentleman is referring to, that the climate is different. And I also know that if somebody wants to bring something on campus and they know they're going to get checked their backpack, you got to be crazy to put something in the backpack that you know you're going to hand to somebody as you walk into school. And so anyway, so I don't know how much more we're going to beat this up, Mr. Gallarz. I'd like to come to an idea and move forward.
Yes, we're going to move on to the metal detectors. If we have,
do
I'm
have
so
one
sorry.
question.
Yes, Garcia. Yeah. Mr.
Because we
Garcia.
have the head of security
Yes.
here. From a purely security standpoint, do you feel like the backpack inspections helped? So I know that there are all of these other issues that I completely agree with, but from a purely security standpoint, did the backpack inspections help?
It may have helped the onset of doing it. But it's not effective anymore.
Can you say, comment on why you think it's no longer effective?
The comment was already made by the board that they're in tune that if they bring items on their person isn't being checked.
I see. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing us to be in the spot. And then we're going to continue because now we're going to talk about yes.
May I?
Yes.
I'm gonna push you a little bit. One of the things that we use as data, the student support services uses, is the number of incidents at a school campus. They have declined since the backpack checks. The number, just pure numbers. Okay?
How are you defining incidents? Like an incident is what?
Well, using traditional data that we use, the number of weapons on the campus that have been identified.
Okay.
The number, and one of the things that we also learned earlier on was that while we might not have, before the backpack check, while we might not have caught it, a student was the one who would let us know that their peer had the weapon. That has also declined substantially, right? So the reporting from student to us of another student having a weapon has also declined. So in using data that we traditionally used to determine how many weapons show up on a campus on a daily basis has declined since backpacks. So my concern is you saying that it worked before but doesn't work now. I would want to know what data you're using to determine that. And number two, what are we going to put in its place in the short term? Because there could be a reaction to us removing all of that and thinking, yay, it's all gone now. And then you and your team are going to have to react. All of the other folks are going to have to react to what we had prior to. That's my fear, that we will revert to what we have. So if you can talk about it in terms of what we know factually happened and is happening now.
So thank you for that information, Dr. Valentino. I was not aware of the data. And so when looking at it through that lens, there has been a decrease in the sense of weapons being brought onto campus. And I can attest to that because I am not getting phone calls from administration of items being found when it comes to weapons. What I'm getting at is that there's rumors in that we can simply put it on our person because students aren't being checked. So that's what I'm getting at. But in the sense that I'm not getting calls by staff members and administration, that is true. I don't get calls as much.
But let me ask a question then. Is the data you're getting reports of or actual finding of weapons and incidents? Because as you know, we heard already a lot of those reports during a certain time when a lot of other things are going on. It was like the new fire alarm, right? Let's pull a fire alarm. Well, let's just tell somebody that I saw a knife, or let's just tell.
Yeah.
That seemed to be what was happening,
Exactly what happened.
and they coincided with a lot of interesting things. But so is it that we're not having reports anymore? Which I assumed after certain things happened that the reports were going to go down anyway. But is it actual confiscation and finding of weapons? It's
Both.
right.
And the reason the false reporting has also subsided is because we actually had to shut down Sprigio, because the way that the system works would allow a student or an adult, which happened in one instance, to actually call it out for another school. So let's say that I'm at DM and I could call out that you had something going at CV where you wouldn't even know that. So it wasn't useful.
Yeah, but Dr. Valentino, I'm not even going to get into what I believe caused all that, right? But the reality is that unfortunately, right, when somebody says, hey, somebody has a gun on campus, we have to be vigilant, right? But teachers have to be vigilant. The students have to be vigilant. Security definitely has to go address it and validate whether it's true or not true. The reality is that like a fight, it takes away from a productive day. It takes away from what we do every day, but it gets to a point where there's this consistency of false alarms where we stop reacting to it. Like, oh, we're not shutting down the school. We're gonna do this first now because they're coming in with such frequency that we can't keep doing that. It's gotten to the point where we're just dysfunctional. So I had a conversation with you one time. It says, well, before we shut it down, we're gonna go determine whether or not that's real or not, because it doesn't make sense to do this every time we were getting these phone calls. So whatever we do, it's not gonna be incident proof. Whatever we do, it's not gonna be perfect. I think as what I believe is important as an elected official is to in my most responsible way, you try to balance the complexity, right, of all the things that are happening, right, and to try to make decisions based on practicality, to try to make decisions of compassion for our children, right, and as we're talking about the school, it's very personal to me because my daughter goes to school there, and so, and it would not that would matter, but it does matter, right, because I live by there. I hear the ambulances. I hear not the ambulances, the police cars every time they call in. 67. I don't know. It seems like 60, 70 cars running to the school. I want to get in my car and go over there, but I'm not going to help the situation. I have to be patient like every other parent. So my point being is, whatever we do, whatever we decide today, I think the idea of getting into the conversation of the metal detectors without having some type of a permanent fence, at least to the front of the school, I don't think it's a conversation we need to have right now until we decide how and how we're going to go in and out of the school. Where are we going to set those? There needs to be things figured out architecturally. We need to figure out how we're going to build a safe and secure space, what that looks like. And then we're going to have to figure out how people get in and out. And then we're going to have to deal with the logistics of how many people have to man that post, right? Do we have logistically enough people to run those posts without compromising a fight that's happening on the other side of school? Well, somebody's looking at a screen and other people are checking bags. I don't know. I don't think that's a discussion right up for tonight. I think I'd like to move forward on the idea of bringing down the fences. I don't believe we should. I think once we bring down the fences, the idea of checking backpacks is, and then I'd like to look at maybe doing what we've done in the past, maybe the last 2 weeks of school, no backpacks, and call the question and get this, continue to have these discussions.
I mean, I think what would be interesting, and I think that you brought up a good point, there are a lot of questions around the detectors and the fences. And let's just at least broach, what are the questions? What are the hesitations? What are the things that you would want answers to? So at least we move that point just a little bit forward tonight. And we can do that very quickly. And you've already listed some of those issues that that these detectors are bringing up for you. Yeah, so let's, I mean, What,
mean,
I don't know
as
what you
simple
mean
as do they
exactly.
work?
Do they work? Yeah. Work.
You know,
Everywhere I've seen them, they are only used in conjunction with searching tags or searching things, no matter where you go.
Well, that's your, alarm.
That scenario that was brought to me.
That's your alarm.
To say that the searching continues, it's not just that. And the new ones that we use, and you send us some articles, and it depends who you listen to. You listen to some other groups and they say, well, they don't work. You listen to the companies that make them, they say they're 100% foolproof. So again, is it going to serve the purpose that we want?
Yeah.
Is it going to allow with our values that we feel that, and again, people who know me, nobody should be shocked that I say this. It's almost like we're treating our kids and our parents and our volunteers who have to walk through those doors that you have to prove to me that you're innocent. You're guilty until you prove to me that you're innocent because I don't trust you
every morning.
because this district isn't like other districts and other districts, they do all this stuff and we're not other districts. We're our own. We have our own identity. We have our own values. And so again, and speaking just for myself, is this what we want? We had someone come to the board and say, and she's a friend, and she said, wouldn't it be wonderful if we were the first school in the valley to put up metric tags? I said it would be an embarrassment. It would be something that would be like the worst thing that ever happened on my watch on the board, because we have decided that only us, we can't control our community. Our community is that bad that we have to do all these things that no other community has to do just because. Now, I get that there's a line, and again, I'm only speaking for myself, but again, people who know me shouldn't be shocked at this, like somehow, oh, well, look him. No, I've always been like this. Growing up in this community, having, Alonis told us how he grew up. Every one of us in this room that grew up here have the same kind of story. A little different. He grew up in the ranch. I grew up down in Coachella off of 52. A whole different set of other rules in that neighborhood, right? So again, is that what we want to be? Do we want to be the district that doesn't trust our community, that are afraid of our parents? Because the only people going through these things are students. Last time I checked, they're only going to be students and parents. I am one if the board decides, and again, board members decide to do something, that's democracy. That's how we go. But I would demand that every single person, because when I went to Coachella, there was no exemptions for anybody. Everybody had to walk through those things.
Okay, I mean, so you're giving me, okay, so you're offering an opening and you're saying, okay, under these conditions, maybe.
I would vote for it anyway, but if the board decides.
I'm not asking you, exactly, I'm not asking you.
If the board decided to go that way, that would be something that I would have to say it's everyone or no.
Everyone or no one, under those conditions, it would be more acceptable.
No.
Not, but,
Yeah,
okay,
But again,
I understand what you're saying.
If a majority of people on this board decide to do something, regardless of my own personal opinion, and I think board member Alona shared the same thing, that's what we do. And we do this all the time. I don't always vote with the majority. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But if the board makes that decision that that's going to be our new value, then that's the decision that gets made, regardless if I vote for it or not. And we support it and we move forward.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of chime in as to whether it works or not, I did a little bit of reading, and an article by the West End Justice Prevention Research Center demonstrate that there is little to no research that supports the idea of metal detectors working, right? I think if I go back to the article, there's 2 mass shootings exemplify how metal detectors can be insufficient, right? March 21, 2005, a student arrived and shot and killed the unarmed security guard who was operating the metal detectors, went through the metal detectors and, began doing what they wanted to do, right? On November 1st, 2013, a gunman entered Terminal 3 at LA Airport and made his way to security checkpoint. There again, there's metal detectors, shot the people at the metal detectors, went through and kept on doing what they wanted to do, right? So it's there is, very insufficient evidence that proves, right? I think more than the evidence, it's the fear, the fear-based factor of look, there's metal detectors, I feel safe.
and do you feel that because do you feel that you saw any interest or anything that's new in these kind of new generation? Because these are supposed to be new generation detectors, right? They're not supposed to be, from what I understand, they're not supposed to be like metal detectors. They're more like, they're really going to catch guns and weapons of mass destruction. So that's what I understood. Do you see anything, does seeing that change or make you think differently about the detectors?
I don't know that enough data was provided. I mean, we saw a video of how it was implemented in a school and that was it.
What more what kind of data would you
Well, you're
suggest?
asking us, right? A
Yes.
question if there's anything new technology, what do I know if that wasn't presented to them? So.
A weapon of mass destruction.
Got it.
Yeah.
Or weapons, yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, so in terms of just talking about metal detectors, right? The reason why I thought SROs were the best option is because the least invasive, right? That the person would not be searching every student. And so I thought in terms of least invasive would be an SRO, right? But I did go through a metal detector that was presented, right? And it was like you walk through it. It's quick, right? I didn't have to take anything out of my persons. And
Well, if it buzzed, you would.
But
If it buzzed, you would.
well, let me finish. So I'm not saying that, right? Because I'm not, just in terms of the metal detectors, I'm telling you what my experience was actually walking through a metal detector, right? But then again, comes the questions of, are we ready to have the infrastructure ready for these metal detectors? Because I know one of the entrances at CV High School is on dirt. And so is it possible to put there, right? And would that take time? And so I think, maybe it's 6 months from now, but I still disagree with, I still agree that the most least invasive thing to do, immediate thing to do is to have SROs. But if this was something, the system seemed like it would move people quickly. And that's just what I saw, right? I'm not telling you that if I had something, it wouldn't stop me, but I'm saying that's what I saw. It moved hundreds of people quickly, and I'm just speaking to metal detector.
Got
This
it.
time.
Yeah. So it's,
Mr. Redondo, this is the third time you bring up RSO, and I'm just gonna say it. I don't know Mr. Bianco, right? He might be the nicest guy in the world, and he might have the best officers in the world. But if there's any truth to the fact that he's a card-carrying oath keeper, right? Just in the news today, we had 4 people that are oath keepers, right? Starting with Stuart Rhodes, the main guy. They were guilty of seditious conspiracy on the U.S. government, and you have that guy as the head of the RSO, right? And he might be the nicest guy in the world. I don't know him, right? But does that type of mindset worry about the little brown faces that come to school in our school district? Probably not. So I have a problem with how, with this militia, oath keeper type people, right? It's something that's real, and it's I'm not making this up. They just convicted him yesterday, and so when you keep talking about the RSO as if they make you feel safer, I don't know. Again, we could go through what's the 370 some incidents that have happened across this country. Many of them have had those resource officers, or they've done it in courtrooms, they've done it in shopping malls, they've done it in churches, they've done it. It doesn't matter. This idea that we're going to feel safer because we're spending $800,000 for 3 officers in our school district, I think that's irresponsible, and it should never be political, right? Our school safety should never be political.
Well,
I feel no, I don't think so. I believe that when you start saying that it's going to make us safer, it's almost like if something was to happen, you would want to say you're setting up the framework of I told you we should have had RSO on campus.
Mr. Gonzalez, I've told you before, we can agree to disagree. It's fine. Respectfully.
I disagree. I'm just telling you when you keep repeating that that's a platform on how we're gonna.
It's the least invasive thing to do for our schools, Mr. Gonzalez, and that's what we're having a conversation on today.
He was, sorry, just to clarify, Mr. Hernando was talking about the detectors for now, and I appreciate that. And I'm gonna wrap it up because
And since he brought it up, and again, this is who he is, so I don't, it's not personal. This is what he believes in, and so I respect that.
Sure.
But just like we talked about the metal detectors, show me the data that you are actually safer. They actually do this. Now, the data says that you can look at all the sites that they've had these problems, that there was those people on campus and it happened anyway. That's number one. You do the other statistics that I've read, and again, everybody has a statistic, everybody does their research, but the ones that I say is sure, they do really well in kind of upscale, predominantly white communities. But when it comes to the minority children in those same schools, those children don't feel safe. They don't feel like they're bonding. And so again, I go back to my original point is, what are the values that we think? And again, don't get me wrong, the sheriffs have an important role. When we call them and they come, I appreciate it because that is their job. And they do a great job when they do come. And I know a lot of them taking the sheriff himself out of the situation, not a fan, but the deputies who come do a great job and they do. But my point is that in my opinion, my own opinion, that the role, for what they want to pay the 4 officers, we could get 10 security people to the point. I'd rather get our own 10 security people if I'm going to pay that kind of money, and you can use them wherever you need them. You can be fluctuating when this happens.
sorry, can I just
That goes back to, and that's a funding issue, which yes, we all have to worry about security, but we also got to fund this stuff.
sorry, just to wrap it up, and I apologize that I have to wrap it up now. But because we have a time limit, and I understand that you're all busy and you need and we're sort of going back and forth with this the RSOs, but I appreciate your thoughts. Is the reason why you're bringing up the RSOs now because you feel that the RSO question is linked to the detector question, or can moving forward can that be a separate issue?
It is a separate.
It is a separate.
It is a separate-
Good. That's what I'm just saying.
Got you.
But
Okay,
we
so
still
just
apply
wanted
the
to
same
clarify.
rules as where's the data,
Got it.
right?
So just to wrap it up, thank you for participating, and for the detectors, I already jotted down a few things. Are there any other questions or clarifications that you would want? And you brought up some really good ones, and Mr. Aranda said, it's maybe the least invasive. There are questions about architecture, where to put them, do they work? We want some data on that. And sort of the timing, when would they be ready or be able to be implemented? Is there anything else that we want to add to that?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, great.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
I motion.
Thank
Is there a
you.
second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstain? Meeting adjourned at 7:28.